There is someone close to you right now, closer than your doubts, closer than your prayers. Their presence has been silently rearranging the atmosphere around your destiny, and God can't stay silent about it anymore. This isn't a message you stumbled on. It's an interruption, a sacred collision between heaven's timing and your awakening, because the person you've trusted may not be aligned with where you're going, and until now, you weren't ready to see it. Was it love, or was it loyalty to a version of you that no longer exists? Were they placed by God, or tolerated by your fear of letting go? You've felt it, the tension that doesn't speak but weighs, the smile that feels heavy, the laughter that doesn't land. You've been shrinking in their presence, not because they ask you to, but because your spirit no longer fits in the room they live in. God is lifting the veil now. And when He reveals, He doesn't do it to embarrass, He does it to release. The silence you've been living in wasn't punishment, it was protection. The unease was not a warning to be ignored. It was the whisper of alignment preparing to roar. There is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. And now, it's time. The voice you trusted, the friend you leaned on, the person who knew your softest spaces, they're about to show you who they are when your light no longer dims to match their comfort. This is Echoes of the Chosen, and if you've been feeling the tremble beneath your peace, the static in your spirit, this message is your confirmation. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear may explain the spiritual disconnection you've never been able to put into words. This is not just revelation. This is the unsealing of your scroll. Let's begin. The signature you didn't see. They were sent as a shadow beside your light, not to walk with you into destiny, but to test the clarity of your discernment. You called them safe because they stayed close. But proximity was never proof of purpose. Some people do not appear as opposition. They arrive as comfort, as understanding, as familiar. And yet their presence has secretly kept your soul in survival mode, smiling, nodding, but slowly shrinking. Judas never missed a prayer meeting. Delilah never raised a weapon. Not every threat announces itself as danger. Some threats wrap themselves in loyalty. The truth is, the person closest to you has had access not just to your story, but to your sensitivity. And what they've spoken over you in silence has echoed longer than what they've said out loud. You weren't mistaken. You were being spiritually monitored. God let them stay near, not to bless you, but to reveal you. He needed you to feel the weight of a closeness that didn't carry covenant. Because until your discernment grows stronger than your emotions, your calling remains vulnerable. Some connections are not assignments, they are assessments. And now, the test is concluding. When heaven goes quiet. You asked why the dreams slowed, why the answers felt muffled, why your prayers returned in whispers. It wasn't abandonment. It was divine restraint. Heaven went quiet to protect what you weren't ready to hear. Because if you had seen their truth too early, you would have tried to save them instead of releasing them. Obscurity is not a punishment. It is a spiritual greenhouse. Even Jesus lived 30 years in silence before the heavens opened. David returned to fields after being anointed, and Moses wandered the desert for 40 years before the burning bush spoke. The silence was surveillance. God was watching how you handled what didn't change, how you honored what felt delayed. He needed to see if you would still trust when clarity wasn't immediate, because the chosen are not crowned in crowds. They are confirmed in caves, and the cave was never empty. It was sacred. What you thought was loneliness was really insulation. God kept you hidden, not to punish, but to preserve. You weren't being overlooked, you were being observed. The furnace of revelation. When clarity comes, it rarely feels kind. The truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it burns. And when the mask falls from someone you trusted, the sound it makes is silence. Pain is a forge. It does not ask for permission to sculpt. Betrayal is the sacred blade God uses to carve away what can no longer follow you. Job lost everything in one breath, not as punishment, but as pruning. You've cried over connections that couldn't survive the fire. But what burned wasn't your future. It was your dependence on what kept you small. Every chosen one must pass through the forge. Esther had to face the silence of the king's court. Joseph had to be thrown into a pit by his brothers before he could interpret Pharaoh's dreams. God is not sentimental with your attachments. He will burn the bridge that leads back to bondage. He will disrupt the illusion of loyalty when it's standing between you and your scroll. Some friendships end, not because they failed, but because they were fulfilled. And now the flame has done its work. The cost of ignoring your spirit. You knew before you knew, not in your thoughts, in your bones. The heaviness, the subtle shift, the uneasy silence after they spoke. Your spirit warned you, but your loyalty silenced the alarm. Discernment unheeded becomes torment. God gave you signs wrapped in discomfort, but you called it mood swings. You excused it as stress, and now the delay is weighing down your momentum. When chosen ones ignore divine discomfort, they trade destiny for dysfunction, and the trade is never even. Samson stayed too long, not because he lacked strength, but because he lacked separation. And what was once love became a leash. What once comforted eventually cut his hair and his power. You are not called to carry what confuses your calling. You are not assigned to heal what was only meant to test you. Disobedience doesn't always look like rebellion. Sometimes it looks like staying loyal to someone God already released. Let the ache speak now, not as guilt, but as instruction. When clarity feels like loss, there is a unique grief reserved for those who awaken, not because of death, but because of recognition. You're mourning the version of someone you hoped they would be. You're releasing the potential you once protected. But clarity is not cruelty, it's mercy. Because what once brought peace now carries weight, and the heaviness isn't an attack, it's a revelation. Mary had to carry the Son of God while Joseph questioned her honor. Sometimes, even the people who love you can't walk in the fullness of your anointing. Not because they're evil, but because they're not aligned. God is not asking you to hate them. He's asking you to release them. And in that release, your vision will sharpen. Not because they were the problem, but because your peace requires pruning. Freedom often looks like silence. And silence is how heaven closes the door. The scroll you've been carrying. There's an assignment you've been sensing, a calling you've been circling. You haven't named it, but it keeps finding you in the quiet. It's written on your heart like ink that refuses to fade. God won't release you into it fully until your hands are empty, because scrolls can't be unsealed in cluttered arms. And blessings don't land where burdens are being protected. Moses wasn't given his assignment until Egypt was behind him. Not just the place, but the mindset. He had to release his guilt, his past, and even his fear of speech before the fire spoke his name. You've been carrying the weight of unfinished conversations, of needing closure, of trying to make peace with misalignment. But heaven isn't waiting on reconciliation. It's waiting on release. This next scroll is not for the version of you who bends. It's for the one who stands. And now, your hands are almost ready. You're not alone in this unveiling. What you're going through is not isolated. It's synchronized. Across the earth, the remnant is awakening to the same unrest, the same spiritual exposure, the same divine separation. You're not crazy. You're being calibrated. There are others like you, carrying the same ache, hearing the same whisper, wrestling with the same choice: stay where it's safe or walk where it's sacred. Elijah thought he was the only one, until God told him, "I have reserved 7,000. There is always a remnant. You've never been alone. Your silence has echoed in other hearts, And now, those echoes are growing louder. Your tribe doesn't need explanation. They just need your presence. Your echo must be heard. Everything you've been through wasn't just survival. It was preparation for transmission. The release you're about to walk into is not for applause. It's for awakening. Your story is not just personal. It is prophetic. When you speak from the healed place, your voice becomes a trumpet. When you walk in clarity, your presence becomes a scroll. You don't just carry breakthrough. You are the breakthrough. David didn't write psalms from palaces. He wrote them from caves, from weeping, from exile. And those cries became the echoes we still read today. So let this be the beginning of your echo. The silence is breaking. The scroll is opening. The remnant is listening. Not everyone who walks with you was meant to stay. Not every hand that held you was clean. And not every silence was absence. Some silences were sacred wombs where your discernment was being born. You weren't delayed. You weren't abandoned. You were hidden for such a holy hour as this. Because only in hiddenness could heaven expose what your eyes weren't ready to see. Only in stillness could your spirit recognize what noise once disguised. And now, the veil has been lifted. The weight you felt wasn't confusion. It was confirmation. The unease in your chest was never emotional. It was prophetic. You are not the same. You cannot return to blindness. And you will never again mistake proximity for purpose. You are a chosen one, called, tested, refined. You walked through fire and didn't lose your light. You stood in silence and didn't lose your voice. You carried what tried to break you. And now you carry what will awaken nations. You have been marked. You have been forged. And now you are being sent. If this word stirred something deep in your spirit, if you know this message was confirmation, comment 777 below. Let heaven see your agreement. Let the remnant recognize your echo. Share in the comments what pierced you. What truth finally gave language to the ache you've carried in silence? What moment made the tears fall because your soul remembered? Subscribe and stay connected to Echoes of the Chosen. This is more than a channel. It's the sound of the remnant rising. The others are waking up too, and they are looking for the ones who understand. You are not alone. You are the next echo.